We there was a sergeant from the 199th Infantry Brigade came down. We had him come down to the site because we had all, I think, gotten the M16 machine guns, but we thought we'd fire all the weapons so that we knew how to use them properly and just, you know, make sure they worked properly and all that. So we had an M60 machine gun with us. We had our M16s. We had a M79, which is a grenade launcher. I think those were the primarily ones. And then we had the Koreans. Some Koreans come with their M1 rifles. And we all got in a deuce and a half. And we drove out to this remote area where we were going to fire them off. And I got thinking a lot of times while we were driving out there, boy, this area is remote. It's out in the middle of nowhere, you know, and I'm thinking, what in the world are we doing out here? But that we were going out there to fire weapons. And we ended up with this big hill. So the deuce and a half pulled up. We all got out of the deuce and a half, and all of a sudden we hear this pop, 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 pop. And look around, oh, we hear it again, pop, 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 pop. And we see the hill where the rounds are hitting. And the sergeant, we realize that we're being shot at. And he says, everybody behind the hill. So we all run and we get behind the hill. Then he says, okay, this is the sergeant from the 199th Infantry Brigade. He says, okay, we're going to sweep the area. So he says, everybody out in front, spread out line, we're going to sweep the area. So I ran to the deuce and a half and got my flak vest on. And I remember on my right was Sergeant Lee, a Korean. And on my left was Andy Stanfield, one of my buddies. And there was one guy who had the ammo for the M60 machine gun, and he was crawling. He wouldn't stand up. But we all spread out, and then we started sweeping the area from where the fire was coming from. Well, I saw a big hill. There's a lot of sagebrush like this stuff, and then there's a big mound I saw that we're going towards, and all I could think of, oh God, you know, machine gun fire is going to open up on us any minute from there. But we're sweeping the area, and as we get closer, we see a hole in the mound, I believe, and Sergeant Lee is the smallest guy there, the Korean. So I think the sergeant handed him a 45 and told him to go check it out. Well, he went, and there was nothing there. They had left. What had happened was it was probably they were going to stash a cache. We called it a cache there, where they put weapons and materials and things like that. The VC would hide stuff in various places where they could get to it. And that's probably what they were going to do. And we probably could have been one or two, and they took off, but they weren't very good shots. They shot at us and they just hit the hill there. So we went back and told everybody about it. It was no big deal. It's like, hey, we got ambushed, you know, we're out in the middle of nowhere.
No big deal.
Yeah, we all spread out. But I mean, I just thought, you know, we were getting fired on, but we didn't. They took off. So we were lucky.
Now, were there any other instances that stood out like that to you? Any other occasions like that?
No, we had, you know, several red alerts at night. And my job, like I said, I had to clean and maintain the M60 machine guns. There were 4. I had to carry one. So when I ran out to a bunker, I had to have my M60 machine gun, my M16 rifle, my flak vest on, my helmet, and I don't know how much weight I had, but I was not a big guy. I probably weighed 170, 180 pounds, and I've got all that equipment on me running out there, but I'd have to run out to a bunker. And I think I fell one time and somebody thought I was hit. And I said, no, I just fell. There was supposed to be radio silence at night on the comm when we're on red alert. Mm-hmm. But guys would goof around and make cricket sounds on it and stuff like that. They'd go zzz, stuff like that. And then the lieutenant would get angry and the sergeant would get mad and said, whoever that is, shut up, you know, we'll get you, you know, we'll court martial for that. You guys wouldn't listen. They just make sounds on there and stuff. It's something to do.
Just to pass the time again.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. I mean.
Now, your base also had a few dogs, and that's a way to pass the time. What were their names and what type of breeds were they? Well,
they were just mutts. We had one dog named Snoopy, and he was the rat dog. We'd yell, no, his name was Pete. And Pete the rat dog, we'd just yell, rat, Pete, rat, because they would be in our barracks. and he would go crazy, and he would love to kill rats, and he would just go, if you saw one and yell, rat Pete, he would go berserk and go try to find that rat. We
Nice.
had Snoopy, which was a black and white mutt dog. And then we had RF, was just a little puppy. They called him some other name, but a lot of us guys called him RF. Rat. I won't say what the F stands for, but anyway, we had
Did they,
those three dogs, but they were good dogs. Pete and Snoopy sometimes would get into a fight and we'd have to break them up, but they were there for as long as I could remember. Pete and Snoopy mostly, that the little dog came later, but it was good to have them around. They were good pets. Everybody liked them, but and they stayed in the barracks with us because sometimes they would keep the, you know, rats from coming in, or snakes would come in during the rainy season. They would crawl into the barracks, you know, anything could come in. It was open air barracks. And we had our bunks, and you had a mosquito net that you put over it. You had to have that at night.
mm-hmm.
And, you know, when it was hot, it would be really hot. We didn't have any air conditioning or any crap like that, or, you know, fans or anything like that.
Right.
I mean, you could buy a little fan if you could get one and find some way to plug it in and make it work if you could. But mostly it was just open air, and just got used to it. You get used to the heat, or during the rainy season, it was cold, wet and cold.
Like, would they sleep with you guys, or did they, you know, have
They'd
specific?
sleep on the floor, or maybe I'm trying to remember if they made beds for them, but they were just all around. I mean, everybody knew them, liked them and stuff. So they just, wherever they wanted to sleep or wherever they wanted to be, they could do that.
Now, you've already mentioned some of the guys you served with overseas, and you've mentioned a few names of some of your sergeants. Any of them were your friends, or, you know, ones that you related to a lot?
You know, no, I was there for 2 years and 2 months. Most guys were there just a year. So a lot of guys came through, but when we have our reunions or get-togethers, it seems like more now. We're more together now than we were then. I mean,
Awesome.
we were then, I mean, because we went through it together, but you grow closer to the guys as you know, have these reunions. You get to sit down and talk, and, you know, then it's just, you're in Vietnam and you're going through, just trying to get through the days. And a lot of guys are just trying to do their time and get back home.
Yes.
So after you've done it, you know, it's kind of like, you know, when we talk to each other, you know, you don't call them by their name, you just call them brother.
I love it.
You know,
We
you
were,
just call them brother because they're brothers, you know. Now that's just, you shared something together that's just lifelong lifelong experience.
you know, my friend and I, we were talking about that when we were going to play cards. We were just talking that with people, even if they're not your family, but like you being able to refer to them, just like my son does with a couple of his good friends, you know, he's my brother. I call those other boys my other son. You know, you guys can come together, and it's like a brotherhood.
Well, if I send a Christmas card to them, I always put, and it ends with brothers forever, you know.
Love
And
it.
yeah, we call each other brother, and it means a lot. Like I said, we went through a lot together, and that's just how we refer to one another. And I always say, you know, if I send something to them, as brothers forever.
I love it. Did you ever encounter or see any segregation? If so, what do you recall about it?
No, no. I mean, we had black guys on our side, and black guys that were linemen, black guys that worked in the comm center. VC Wilder, I know it's VC. Yeah, it's just a real good. He's a black guy. He was really well thought of at the site. He was kind of like ran the site. He was a sergeant, and we all respected him, and we see him at the reunions and stuff like that. So no, not really. But I will say, yeah, it did. But as the war went on, and probably the second year that I was there, if you went down in downtown Saigon, there were certain bars that the blacks kind of claimed that were theirs. You didn't go in those bars.
Mm,
A little bit, not much, but
look,
like on our site, no,
that's
didn't
good.
see that.
I like that. That's awesome. Were there many casualties in your unit or crew? Which I don't
No,
think there
no,
weren't.
just one that got some shrapnel in his back. I
And
mean,
you were,
we did have some guys that tried to commit suicide, but that were very depressed. And like I said, when you're on a site and you're working 12, 14-hour days, 7 days a week, it can get depressing. I mean, depending on the mood and what's going on. There were some bad times there. I mean, there were some really down times and bad times. We had some sergeant or two that were really bad. They weren't good, and it created a real atmosphere, a bad atmosphere, a scary atmosphere.
yeah. And you mentioned that about one of your sergeants, that he just had a really hard time.
He had a
with-
hard time, and he would call for formation. I mean, and you don't do that on a little site. We're in Vietnam, and we're on the little site, but he would go around checking IDs and stuff like that late at night, and he was just got very paranoid. And I think he was depressed, and he was paranoid, and he created that mood there, which was really bad. And even during the rainy season, we were all in the barracks one day, and he came inside and he said he had broken the frogs' code, that he knew it was plus 3D to minus 3D, and he'd broken their code. And we knew that he was crazy.
Yeah. That
And
he
they
was
took
just
him
bad.
away, and I think for a while, and then brought him back. And then when he left again, I heard he had committed suicide or something like that. He just had a lot of problems.
And that sometimes happens. It sometimes does. Now, you were never wounded.
No.
No. Okay. Did you wrote home often, and you got letters from home?
Yes.
And then from your dad as well, and we're
I
going to
did.
talk about him next.
Yeah.
Not only did you serve in Vietnam, but your dad did too, which is amazing. And you were able to have Thanksgiving and Christmas with him. Please tell us about these memorable times with your father.
Well, my dad I was in Vietnam for 26 months. My dad was in Vietnam for 3 years, but just separate years, like there a year. I had mentioned that when I was in high school, when I was in the 11th grade, he was gone. And in my senior year, he was gone. He was in Vietnam. And then he was home a year, and then there a year, and then home a year, and there a year. We were there a year together, probably mostly 1969. He came and spent Thanksgiving with me at the site. He was stationed at Van Rang at the time, and he came and spent Thanksgiving with me, and went on patrol with my buddies because I had guard duty. And there was a patrol, and I would have been on the patrol, but I was on guard duty. So my dad went on patrol with my buddies. And I got a picture of that. I took a picture of him and my buddies getting ready to go on that patrol. And so we had a nice Thanksgiving dinner together. And then I flew on a C-120 to see him at Christmas time. And he was still at Van Rang. He had mentioned in a letter to me that he probably wouldn't be able to get off duty, but he'd just take me around with him. So whenever he went around checking on his men, he was in charge of base security in the towers and wherever their sites where they were supposed to be on guard duty. He would check on his men. And I rode around with him in a Jeep, and the Jeep had a M60 mounted on it, and he had this old dog that would ride with him. And I rode with him, and sometimes if a rabbit jumped up in front of the Jeep, the dog would jump out and chase it. But my men because my dad was always go around and check on them. Because I remember that one Christmas that I spent with him, they were on red alert. And I went around with Dad to check on his men. Nothing happened, they were just on red alert. But there were some other separate times when my dad was in a couple of real big battles. One was at Tan Son Nhut, I think, and one was at Pleiku. I'm not sure. I have to look back at the records. But he was up for 3 silver stars and got 3 bronze stars instead. But I did receive the Army Commendation Medal during 1968, I think, for meritorious service. But he was in a lot more conflict than I was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, your story is exciting too. I love hearing every detail. I love all these stories that make your story. It's just wonderful.
Well, it's not like, the guys that were really in combat that really saw some horrific things or went through some terrible times. And there were many that did, but there were also a lot of us there, thousands of us there that didn't.
Yeah.
And everybody had their job, everybody had the thing that they had to do. So it was a different experience for everyone.
Yes. And being able to share some of the other details that when I do interview those that were in combat, a lot of those would be based around that. But by your experiences, you were able to share some of the cultural side of things and some of the education on the communications and just like the elements of the Agent Orange and even the villages,
Yeah.
and so that's all important for us as Americans and people around the country other countries that I hope maybe we'll be able to see this later, to be able to just think back on those times and to remember just different parts of our history.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I will say that all of the guys on the site, we were proud. We were proud to serve. I mean, we were proud to do it. We knew that there were a lot of circumstances involved in the Vietnam War, but we were proud, to be there and do our part and do what we needed to do. And I think when we saw what was going back on in the States as far as protests and things like that, we didn't mind that. The thing that we did not like was when somebody back in the States was marching in the march and maybe held up a Viet Cong or an NVA flag. We did not like that. We did not appreciate that. We all agreed, even if we weren't in favor of the Vietnam War, we did not like that at all.
Right. That must have been very hard. Did it make you feel sad, or how did it make you feel?
No, I mean, the war changed, Kathy. If you remember when it started or when we started going over there in the mid 60s, remember the Battle of the Green Beret, the kind of all that and rah rah. But then you had the massacre at My Lai by Lieutenant Calley. So the outlook of the war changed, and these horrific things started coming out. It wasn't all a blaze of glory like the Ballad of the Green Berets.
Mm.
There were horrific things that happened, not only to the Vietnamese, but to Americans as well. So the outlook and the attitude over the course of the time that men, I guess, were that changed. It changed. But for us, I just remember being there and that we were, again, proud to be there. We were not against the protesters. We just didn't like it when they held up the VC or NBA flag or something like that. We did not appreciate that. We didn't like that.
Right. Was that local, or did you get to hear news back home, with some of the things going on in America? Or
Well, everything came through American Forces Vietnam, through that venue, through the radio or TV. Everything was, through the Army or through the armed forces. So you saw that, but you saw what was news on what was going on. But the Army, I guess, had its own take, but I don't think it was filtered that much. I think it was unfiltered pretty much. You saw what was happening back in the States or what people think. And if you remember correctly, on the news nights, they always had a body count.
Mm.
There was always a body count at the end of the newscast. I don't know if you remember that or not, but there was. Well, on national news every night, if you go back and look at the archives, whatnot, there was a body count. It always showed how many Americans were killed and how many VC or enemy were killed. And today, I think, God, would we do that today? Probably not.
Probably
But there
not.
was back then during the Vietnam War, there was always a body count after the evening news or during the news.
Wow.
And it's kind of morbid, but there was.
Wow. And times change, and we think differently about the way. I mean, it's
Yeah.
all about learning and growing and thinking differently. That's it's by our experience that we're able to move forward. And you know, sometimes it's the difficult things that we learn from, and sometimes I don't know. It's just the social and cultural things that can help us to grow as people.
Well, Yeah, there won't be another. I mean, you look at Vietnam, there was over 55,000 or so men killed, and more than that have committed suicide. And you look at Afghanistan, and all the years there, what, we're 2,500 people? And it's still that sad, 2,500 men
Yeah.
over 10, 15 years compared to Vietnam, 55,000. And more
That's
than that have committed suicide since that time. I mean,
that's
we won't have a war like that, I don't think, again. It won't be like World War I or World War II or Korea or Vietnam. Those are done.
yes. And I hope so. I hope so. Now, we talked about your MOS. You had what was called a critical MOS. Please tell us what a critical MOS was. And you did share with us what you had to do. But if you could just let us know, what that phrase, what that terminology meant.
Well, a critical MOS was if they were shorthanded or if they just couldn't, it was hard to find people to replace you or that job, particular job. Uh, I remember I was always asked, did I want to extend? After my first year, I could have gone home, but I extended for 6 months and then I extended for another 6 months, which really went on to 8 months. So I was there for 26 months, 2 years and 2 months. But a critical MOS is just a position or a job to where maybe it's hard to find replacements for that particular job, or it's a particular job that, like I said, they just don't have many people that can fulfill it.
Right. I just think that's a special ability to be able to go in and be able to fill a position that is needed,
Yeah,
you
well,
know?
I did it too so that I could save for college. It allowed me to, they had at the time a program to where if you put money in savings, I think you got 10% interest on it, if I remember correctly. It was a savings program to where as much money as you saved, they would match, give you a 10% increase on that. And I was able to save, like I said, well over $3,000 during that 2 year time, which was a lot of money. It would buy a car back
Yeah,
in 1970. It would buy a brand new car. And that was
that's
enough money that, in addition to the GI Bill, that helped me get through college to pay for pretty much 95 or 98% of my college myself because my parents couldn't afford it. So it was an avenue for me to save. So I was able to do that. And that was my goal, was to really get to college.
I like it. I love that you were able to save and as well be able to go to college afterwards. Now, when did you get to go back to the USA?
Well, I was discharged, I believe, in June 28th of 1970 and flew back home, and they processed us out. And after they processed us out, they said, "You're civilians, now get out of here." So we just went home. We
Okay,
just
we'll
went
go.
home. And then I applied to the University of Alabama, and I started in September. So that was July, August. So that was like 2.5 months.
Mm.
In 2.5 months, I was able to go to University of Alabama. And when I went to Alabama, you have to take these courses, I think, and pass them to be able to get into college.
Hmm.
Well, it'd been nearly 3 years that I'd been out of high school, and I did okay on my SATs, but these tests that I took to get into Alabama, I don't think I did that well on them. As a matter of fact, I looked at my scores. Most of them were either average or below average. But I think they knew that I, was in Vietnam for 2 years. So it was almost like, let's give them a break. And
Yeah.
I think they really did,
Mhm.
because when I went there and they asked me to write a paper, I had no clue of what to write on.
Mhm.
So I asked the lady if I could write on our security and how we set up our post, our base. And she said, that'd
Nice.
be fine. So I wrote about that. And miraculously, I guess I was able to get in, but I did well my first year. So I did okay. But I was
That's
scared to death. I had been out of school for 3 years. I didn't know anything. The only writing or anything I've done was just the letters I wrote home. And that was it.
that's awesome. Now, that department that you're talking about, that was a department that I worked in when I was in college, was that entrance department. And so I know the writing part of it, that you had to write, and then also you had the math and the English that they
Yeah.
had to, you know,
Yeah, I
that
didn't
yeah,
do that well on them. I think I did average on one or two, and the others I did kind of below average. But I really think they may have looked at my, I had short hair. I was just back in Vietnam. Everybody else, my clothes were out of date. Everybody had long hair, bell-bottom pants, flared shirts with collars. Mine were button-down collars, cuff pants and stuff. I was just told I was back in 1967. Here it
yes,
was 1970. It changed. Our culture had changed. You know how quickly our culture changes.
yes.
But everybody was saying far out and right on and all that. And I didn't, I just was totally a fish out of water.
Oh, wow. How long did it take you? Because I remember you talking about your clothes were different, the time frame in which you were just looking and seeing, wow, that this is a lot different than where we were before I left for Vietnam. And then, like you said, the slangs were different. And how long did it take you to catch up?
About
Like because
6 months.
Mhm.
I mean, I let my hair grow out. 6 months, because I remember earlier going around with my friends and their parents say, "Why can't you be like Skip? Look, he's got a short haircut. He looks so clean cut and decent." And I hated that. And
Mm,
it took me about 6 months before I could really get a date or fit in or something because I let my hair grow. I grew a mustache. So it really took about 6 months. And the other problem I had was a really bad problem is when I came home, I cussed profusely because that's what we did over in Vietnam. It was just no big deal to it. Every other word was, I'm sure, a cuss word or this or that. And girls would look at me and say, "What's the matter with you?" And I had no clue. I'd say, "Well, what do you mean?" And they said, "Well, what are you talking?" So I had to really make a conscious effort to clean up my act
mm,
because, I was 18, 19, 20, 21, and all you hear over there, of course, everybody, the language is colored. I mean, it really is. Everything is. So when you come home, it's just totally, it's different. It's not, you don't do that anymore. So I did, I cleaned up my act. I made a conscious effort to be aware of what I was saying and how I was talking, clean that up,
mm.
clean up, get some clothes and come down from that high that I was on that,
Yeah.
you don't have to be aware of everything around you and everything and all that. So it took about 6 months.
And that's so good again that you were mindful and that you were as you were coming down away from having to be so aware of everything, but you're coming down and also self-reflecting and taking a note of your new surroundings and being mindfully aware of the things that you had to change within yourself. I don't know if that was because that's discipline and that's self-awareness, and that's such a huge part of everybody's life to be able to change and evolve and to grow back into um, the culture,
Well,
another culture from one
all
transition to another.
all these guys coming back from war areas like I was, I mean, you hear a pop or a sound or a whistling sound. I mean, and you're looking around, do I dive somewhere? Do I hide? I mean, you're conditioned. You have to get reconditioned, I guess, is it?
Yeah.
So these guys come back and they say, oh, they have PSCD or something like that. Yeah, they really do. They're having to come down off that high, and you don't just it's not a switch that you just turn off. You can't
Right.
do that.
You can't.
It
You
just
can't.
takes time. It's almost like being deprogrammed. You just have to go through it.
Yes. Now you mentioned the medal or citation that you had. Could you please state that again, what you had received
It was
when you were
the
done?
Army Commendation Medal. And there was a year that I was there when there was a lot. It was for meritorious service, Army Commendation Medal for meritorious service. And it was for a year. And it was November 28, I think 68 to November 69. There were a lot of campaigns and a lot of stuff going on. And I was there during that year. And so I got the Commendation Medal for that. Army Commendation Medal.
That's awesome. Now, how were you received by your family and your community when you came home?
Uh, it was good. The community, it was kind of like there really just was nothing. I mean, but my family's real good, and um, I remember going to a family reunion, and everybody kept asking me, "Did I kill anyone?" And I kept saying, "No, it wasn't like that." That they all think that when you come home from Vietnam, and stuff. But family, it was very good. My mom and my sisters, and I think when I did come home, I'm trying to remember if my dad was home. I think he may have been there still for a little bit, but then came home later. And then when we were both home together, I think one of my sisters called a radio station and told them about us being home together, and the radio station made an announcement of it. We heard it. It was really neat.
That's nice.
And that's about it. Like I said, when you come home, there was really nothing.
Mhm.
It's just like the Army said, you're processed out. And they said, you're a civilian now, get out of here.
Get out of here, be a
And
civilian.
that was it.
That's
I
I
mean,
think
I hear more thank you for your service today and all that when I wear my hat, and I'm amazed to where when we came home, there was nothing. I remember going to one of my first Vietnam veteran reunions with my buddies in Kansas City. We all met downstairs, and we were in a hotel, and we all met downstairs for drinks, and we had our hats on and stuff because we make special hats. I've got several for our reunion and stuff. And there were so many people that were buying us drinks, and it amazed us.
wow.
Thank you for your service, and here, let us buy you a drink and stuff. And we were amazed at that.
In the moment, I think people are just affected by the moment, but I think over time, appreciation grows. And, it's just something to think on that sometimes, and you didn't do it to get rewarded for in any way, but it's just that recognition. Sometimes it's delayed recognition. We get that,
Well,
you know?
it may be. I mean, we also went to this was in Kansas City. We went to the steakhouse to have a real good steak, and there was a wedding going on there. And the father of the bride, I guess, was a military person, and he came, and we had a separate little room for ourselves, and we were all in there, and we were having our steaks and stuff. And he came in there after the wedding and says, "I want to buy every one of you guys a drink. Thank you. I'm military. Thank you for your service." And that just really impressed us. We were overwhelmed. I mean, by the kindness of people saying, "Thank you for your service. Can we buy you a drink?" or stuff like that. It absolutely, and I know it did me, and I think it did some of them too, absolutely just overwhelmed us
That's
that we
awesome.
we were appreciated, and we just really did like that. That was
I,
really something.
I love it. I love it. Now, what career did you have after the war?
Well, after the war, I got a degree in finance from the University of Alabama, majored in banking. And believe it or not, the first job I got was a job in a bank in New Orleans, down on Barone Street. So I had majored in banking, got a job in banking. But after like a year, there was a big real estate crash, and they had to cut a bunch of people, and they were on the seniority system at the bank. So I got cut, and then I went into real estate, and I've been in real estate for like 40 something years in commercial real estate. I was in management and leasing. I leased up buildings, commercial buildings, and managed commercial buildings. So I did that for pretty much all my life.
I think that's pretty cool. Now, what are some life lessons you learned from your time in the military?
Oh gosh, I guess brotherhood's the big thing. That when you go through this with a bunch of guys, you are your brothers. That's the big thing. That's the number one thing. You went through something, even through basic training. You went through something.
Yeah,
In Vietnam, you went through something together. You shared an experience, and you are brothers forever. That's the big experience. But also, I learned some discipline.
mhm,
And I learned that when I went to college, I can just tell you, I would have not have been ready for college after high school. I would have not have done well at all. I thrived and did well in college, and a lot because of my military experience.
Yes.
I hunkered down. My mission, if you will, like we had when you're in Vietnam, my mission was to do the best I could and study. And when I went to college, I had a grand time. I partied and had fun, but I did it in perspective. For
Mm.
me, it was Monday through Friday, hit the books, study. It is that time. Saturday and Sunday are mine. I just have the time of my life, but Sunday evening, get right back to it, right back to the books, and right back to why I'm here. So
Yes.
I learned that lesson, I guess, maturity. Was
Yep.
able to mature a little bit because I know that when I was 18, I went there. I really was very naive and I was a kid.
Mhm.
I really was a kid.
The discipline and the responsibility and diligence, all of that training that they gave you definitely helped to grow you and help you to be ready, for when you were done
Yeah, and
with the war.
respect. I think respect for people.
Yes.
Certainly respect.
Yes. So important. I hope that young people that might see this, it might resonate with them. All of that. I think that it's just a thing that we can all take in no matter where we are in our life. Now, how have your wartime experiences affected or shaped your life?
Well, I think it helps you put your life in perspective
Mhm.
on that. So life is just really day-to-day life is important. Every day is important. Live for every day. Go through life like we talked about with your eyes wide open.
Mhm.
It is an experience. When someone says to you, and I've had it said to me, if you could be anybody, who would you want to be? I'd say be me.
Mhm.
Life was it was a wild experience. It was a roller coaster. It was an up and down experience, and I loved every minute of it, even the bad times, because from them, I defined myself even better. I learned who I was. The good times are easy, but the bad times are the really hard times. And how you handle that and persevere through that defines you on who you are
Yeah.
and how you treat people and what you're going to be. I think that's the most important thing. I had a class once in psychology, and I remember this our teacher up on the stage, and his big line was, "You are what you do," and that's so true. You are how you handled the pitfalls and the really hard times in your life. That defines you on who you are. So all these times, military experience, Vietnam, basic training, all that helps me in defining the person that I am. That's the best way I can explain it.
That is some great wisdom that you just shared, and absolutely is the truth. And it's definitely looking within the good and the bad, and just having that clear understanding. Again, it goes back to mindfulness and being present in the present and just knowing who you are. It's, I wish that our generation now, our younger generation, can grab a hold of that, and I think about my kids, but others that I see around, and just grab a hold of that and take that in. I think that's so wonderful that your experience and that is what you've done. And I, even talking to you and this, just the way that you are, I just think it's admirable and inspirational, and just with who you are as a person. Now, how has your military service impacted your feelings about war?
Well, I would hope that we could avoid it at all cost. I like it when they try to negotiate, to find other means of resolving issues between countries. That's not always going to happen, I think there always is going to be some war somewhere, somehow.
Hmm.
But I hope that we've learned enough that where we handle it in a totally different way. And I think that we have, as I mentioned to you before, there's never going to be, I don't think, I hope, another World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. I mean, we may have the Iraqi wars, the Afghanistans, but if you look at the number of men and women that have perished in those battles, it is far, far, far less, which I like seeing. I
Yes.
don't want anyone to lose a son or a daughter. I do not wish for them to go through that. And
Yes.
I think this conflict is just bad for people. I mean, you look at the economies of these places, you look what the people are going through, and it's just deplorable. It's horrible,
Hmm.
and would not want that, wish that on anyone. So I applaud that we are trying other avenues today, certainly others, to resolve conflict.
Yeah. They're absolutely leadership that is trying to create resolutions and avoid the conflict. And I so appreciate seeing that. And I love it. And you're right. Fighting will never go away, but at least trying to come together. That's what it's all about. Trying to come together to find resolutions and talk things out and be on the same page with the person and listen. And like you mentioned many times, respect and just being still and thinking about that other side and their thoughts, you know.
Well, the
Um,
big word, I think, Kathy, is compromise, which unfortunately in this country, maybe we've lost that. I mean, the leaders of this country or the founders of this country created the uh, Declaration of Independence and uh, the Constitution. And the Constitution, the big thing about it is, and what all these men, the bottom line was compromise. Let's have two parties, let's let them debate and talk, but let's compromise for the good of the country. And maybe other countries need to do the same. They need to compromise to do the best for the people. But unfortunately, there are people who they don't want to do that. It's my way or the highway.
yeah,
And then that's lost. When that's lost, when that compromise is lost for the will of the people or for the betterment of the people, so that they can evolve and not only be better people but a better country, then it's lost.
yeah. And I think we just need to find it again.
Yeah.
Now, three more questions and we're done.
Okay.
What message and life advice would you like to leave for future generations who will see this interview? What wisdom would you like to impart onto this generation and to the next?
I guess just enjoy your life. Uh, Go through life with your eyes wide open. There are a lot of experiences, and you can learn from all experiences and from all people. You can learn not only about them, but about yourself. And you can help yourself onto a better path in life to appreciate it and to help you define yourself better, because ultimately that's what you do. When you get old, you defined yourself, and you defined it through not only the good times, but the really hard times in life and how you handled them and how you treated and related to other people.
Yeah.
Just know that, use that, do that, because that's life. It's a long, long process. It's a long life. And there are a lot of lessons to be learned. And
Yeah.
learn to forgive yourself and to give yourself time to heal in really bad times, but to just have the fortitude to move on.
I love it. I love it. That is excellent. It's outstanding.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
Is there anything else people should know about you?
No, the only thing I could say is that for all us veterans, men and women, and there are thousands out there who have paid the ultimate price, that have given their life for their country. I would just hope that people would appreciate that, and that they would, for most of us veterans, I will just tell you that it's not over for us until we're laid to rest.
Mm.
When we're laid to rest, it's over.
Yeah. I love it. And the one thing that I can say I see from veterans that I've interviewed, and not only you, but a lot of the World War II vets as well, amazing how they're still going. And the gentleman I interviewed before you, still working, you know, and has a construction site, has a construction company, went to the site the other day. It took me 3 times to get his interview because he's just a busy man. And the fortitude that you all have and the go-gettingness, and just like you said, until it's time for you to rest, it's time to live.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Kathy.
Now, is there anything else you feel like we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview?
I can't think of anything, Kathy. I think you've been very thorough, and really thank you. It's been a really, really good experience. I've thought of things and talked about things that I haven't thought about in years and years and years, and it's been really, really great.
I've really, really enjoyed your everything that you've been able to share with us. I've really meeting up with you and taking all those pictures. I'm sorry I didn't have a lot of eye contact at that time. I was just
That's okay.
enthralled with all the pictures and just the memorabilia that you had.
I have this here and have it anytime that you want to see it again or whatever, Kathy. I'm at your convenience.
Thank you so much.
You got it. Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And you have a blessed day, and thank you for your service.
You have one as well. Thank you, Kathy. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yes, we'll see you soon. Mhm.
Bye-bye.
Bye.